Well, welcome everyone. We are once again live at 2. Welcome to One-on-One Live at 2, the second edition of the show brought to you by R. Michelson Galleries in Northampton, Massachusetts. You can visit us at rmichelson.com, rmichelson.com. Welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ilana. I work at R. Michelson Galleries. I am that friendly face you see when you first walk into the gallery. And today, I am joined by the ever delightful and extremely talented Mr. R.W. Alley. Hi there, Bob. How you doing?
Hi, Alana. It's good to see you.
It is so good to see you. Bob is joining us live from his studio in my home state of Rhode Island. How's
Indeed.
it down there? How's this quarantine treating you?
Well, I work at home all the time anyway, so the problem is that now I can't go out and do the things that I would usually do to get away from the studio. But it's a beautiful sunny day here, and so walking around the backyard is a lovely, lovely thing.
Well, I'm so glad to hear it, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us. For those of you who do not know, the gallery has started this wonderful session to give people just an opportunity to talk one-on-one with some of your favorite authors and illustrators. Bob has been kind enough to join us. You know him from such works as Mitchell on the Moon, and you know him from your friends Annabelle and Gretchen, and of course, the beloved Paddington Bear. So Bob, thank you again for joining. I wanted to give people a chance just to sort of log on and
Sure.
Give us a watch. Now, for those of you who did not join us last week, you can still watch that video on our Facebook with Barbara McClintock. But the way this works is I have been emailed questions all week long from all over the world. I've gathered your questions and I am going to ask Bob in real time. Now, if you were not able to email me a question, have no fear. Feel free to comment in that little comment section and I will do my best to get to everyone's questions. So Bob,
Yes.
you ready to dive on in there?
I am, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the questions are, because these will be a surprise.
These will be a surprise, but isn't that the joy of doing something live?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, we're going to get started with a question that comes all the way from one of our viewers in Brazil. Her name is Fernanda, and she would like to know, who were the artists and the people who inspired you when you first started illustrating? Was there a particular book that inspired you as a child? And her follow-up is, who inspires you now?
Excellent questions. Excellent questions. Growing up, I was the books that introduced me to reading were the Little Golden Book series. And my favorite illustrators there, mostly it was, my favorite book was The Sailor Dog by Margot Wise Brown.
Yes.
And Garth Williams was the illustrator. And
Yes.
Garth Williams was probably the reason that I draw mostly in pen and ink and watercolor now, because I just loved his drawings and the way he was able to capture characters so very simply with the pen and ink line. So I've dabbled in other types of styles, but yeah, I always come back to pen and ink. So Ernest Shepard, who illustrated the Pooh books and Wind in the Willows, and Edward Ardizzone, who was a English illustrator. Those guys were the illustrators who I think I probably learned the most from by looking at their work. And today, oh my gosh, today the styles are just, there's such a range of styles. It's remarkable. I mean, everyone from someone like David Wiesner, who does just wonderful, fully realized, gigantic pictures to someone like Mo Willems, who has just synthesized storytelling to the simplest forms. I mean, just everybody, and the formats have changed so much too, and so you adapt your artwork and your storytelling to the formats too, because not everything is a 32-page picture book anymore.
Right.
There's the comic style, which I love, because I always overdraw any story. So the comic book format is a wonderful format because I get to put in every picture that I've drawn for the for the story.
So are you trying to say we can expect some sort of comic strip graphic novel in the future?
We can try.
We can try.
Yeah, I know. I mean, well, I did a couple with the lovely Zoe B. Alley, who's my charming spouse and an in-house author.
Yes.
We did a couple of gigantic comic books. There's a wolf at the door, and there's a princess at the palace behind you. And those are coming back into print sometime this summer. So we're looking forward to reintroducing those, but they're in the comic book format, the graphic. It's not really a novel, but it's a comic format. Lots
a comic format. Yeah. That actually brings us to one of our next questions from Deb. So your wonderful wife, Zoe, writes children's books as well. Yes. And she is wondering, how does your writing and illustrating partnership work? Are you working and collaborating at the same time together, or does she sort of process things separately and then brings you in when it's time to illustrate and bring a manuscript to life? Can you talk a little bit about that working relationship and dynamic with the two of you?
Sure. I think when the author is a different person from the illustrator, the author's words are the story. And she always spends a great deal of time crafting the words and telling the story in the best language she can find. And so she will develop the book to a point of a very finished manuscript. The only questions she'll ask will be questions of, can I illustrate something? Is it possible to put a scene into a visual instead of making it describing it in words? And that conversation is the type of conversations we have. But as far as creating the characters and how they're speaking and their linguistic representation, that's totally hers, and that has to be pinned down before I really can begin to understand the characters and to be able to to sort of visually describe them.
Okay.
So it definitely is. I mean, we will have a conversation as she's beginning a project as to whether it's a project that I would even feel comfortable illustrating, because my artwork tends to skew silly and lighthearted, and so heavy topics presented in a heavy manner, and not my work my pictures would not enhance those stories.
You do have quite a whimsy and a character to all of your illustrations. There really is such a joy with them. Our next question is actually from Leslie. She was hoping you could talk a little bit about your collaboration with the late Sir Michael Bond. And in part, I was also curious, Paddington Bear is such a beloved character. He is an internationally adored bear. When you first began that process, did you have any concerns or fears going into these projects? Were you ever just overwhelmed by the vast responsibility? And how exactly did you come to illustrate these wonderful books?
It's yeah, I've been lucky enough to be the book illustrator for Paddington for over 20 years now,
Yes.
and Paddington first came to life as a I guess what we would call YA book, or it was, you know, in 1958. And he lived as a character in books that were illustrated by the wonderful Peggy Fortnum in pen and ink drawings, but they were chapter books,
Right.
and eventually the stuffed bear was brought to the market, and so the publishers decided they needed to have picture books. So a series of picture book illustrators have worked with Michael Bond's manuscripts uh, of picture book language. He was an amazing writer because he had the ability to write clearly and concisely,
Mm.
both chapter books and picture books and board books. And so Paddington was such a living and breathing character for him that Michael was able to translate Paddington and his world into all variety of books and storytelling. And I came on board because I happened to be doing a series of I Can Read books for the publisher that acquired the Paddington rights in the U.S. And I went over to the UK with the editor and met Michael, and we seemed to hit it off, and he liked my drawings, and he decided that it would be okay if I did the books worldwide. That hadn't been the original plan, but that it turned out to be that way. And so ever since then, we it what is a collaborative effort in that we would talk fairly often about the stories as he was once they were finished, because I had questions,
Mm.
and he would send photographs of the places in the UK that in London that Paddington was in, the story was bringing Paddington to, and it was a lot of back and forth, and he was very respectful of the visual elements. He had a
Mm.
good sense of what could be told visually and what needed to be told in words. And I think that he was a filmmaker also. His day job before being a full-time author was as a BBC cameraman. So he had a very good sense of the visual elements and visual possibilities. He filmed some other children's stories other than Paddington. And so our relationship was, I would say, very close and collaborative. And it was a joy to get a new Paddington book, because there's always a backstory to it. There was always some story, something that had happened
Mm.
in Michael's daily life that prompted him to put Paddington in a similar situation.
Well, that said, Paddington Bear went on many adventures and found himself in some precarious situations. Did you have one in particular that was a favorite to sort of bring to life and illustrate?
I think, oh boy. Well,
I
the
know that
original,
is a hard question. Maybe a top two, three.
it is hard, because the thing about Paddington is that Paddington doesn't age, but the
Mm,
world around him gets more modern.
mm,
And in the time that I was illustrating for Michael, he wrote 3 new chapter books. He hadn't for many years, and they dealt with things like immigration and
big one.
the Olympics when it came to London. So it was all very modern stuff, and he was very adamant that Paddington lived in the modern world. So
Mm,
so some of the some of the fun stuff was that when I first started out, I did a picture book version of the original Paddington story where the Brown family finds him in Paddington Station,
mm,
and that was fine. And I did a lot of research into the what Paddington Station looked like, because it's one thing for an author to type in Paddington Station. It's another thing for an illustrator to have to actually draw Paddington Station. We had that conversation many times. But then about 10 years later, Paddington Station was, the architecture was changed. Things were rearranged, new elements were put into the station, and Michael insisted that essentially the same story be re-illustrated completely with the new station. And that was fun. That was fun because rarely as an illustrator do you get to revisit the same story.
Interesting.
So the challenge there was to tell the same story with the same incidents, but in a fresher way with new architecture. And since then, I'm just saying, Paddington Station has yet again
changed,
been revised.
Yes.
So I don't know what that means, but it's very slick looking. And there's a lot of Paddington Bear now in Paddington Station.
There is. As someone who was just there about a year ago, you can find him just all over the place in that station.
Yes, one of my favorite things is that some of the informational signs are shaped like tags.
Yes.
Like the one that Paddington wears around his neck when
Yes.
his Aunt Lucy gave him. So I thought that was rather fun.
It is. So that actually also brings me to another one of our viewers' questions. This question comes from Megan Bob. She was wondering, there was a British version of a bear called Paddington, and then there was another version for the American release. The story was the same, and most of the images were essentially the same, but with very slight little tweaks, little differences. And she was wondering, why were there two versions of that book?
Now this was a picture book version?
This was a picture book version, yes, of a bear called Paddington.
Now if that may be the difference between those two books. That may be because the story, the original story was the style that I used to tell the originals. The first time I told that first story was an older style that I updated when the Paddington Station got updated. Now the language does change from book to book. There are certain words that, even though it's a common language that we have between the two countries, there are certain words that just don't make any sense. Right. So that changed, and I did have to make sure when I'm drawing anything in regard to Paddington Station to make sure the taxis are on the proper side of the road, because of course the English drive on the different side of the road than we do, which is all very confusing. I'm always confused when I'm watching British television and someone gets out of a car. I think, no, wait, how did they drive? Oh yeah, that's right.
My favorite is going over and seeing on the roads the look left, look right, just to remind us of where we're actually walking around.
Yeah, you do know that was, yes, you realize that was the result of some very bad incidents.
Yes. So I'm going to move over to another question. This comes from Michael, who is an actor, and he would like to know, your characters often display humor through very subtle facial expressions, and those choices that you make tend to convey so much. In a 2D illustration, you're really able to bring them to life. He's wondering if you study human reactions, and if you study people in order to convey those feelings in your art.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Do you sit out there with the sketchbooks, just sketching people, or?
To elaborate. Yes. Sketching people as I move through the world is a wonderful thing to do. Actually, sketching actors on television. As one of the things I like to do at night is to sit with a sketchbook, and draw what I'm seeing on television, and seeing what how the characters are moving on TV. Like here's I mean, it's it's very rudimentary, but whatever's going on there, it's poses, and Michael's right. There are poses and ways people move that are very expressive of the action that they're or the whatever they're going through with their story. And one of the things illustrators often have is a mirror beside their drawing board so that they can actually pose for themselves and try to get because you can't have in your head as an artist every single possibility of facial movement or full body movement. But so what happens a lot of the time is that you'll actually try to act out that type of movement. You'll imagine. The main thing for me to do when I'm drawing a character is to imagine that I am that character and try to inhabit that character. And so if the character is if the character is sad, I tend to get sort of sad and emote that into the page. Of course, that can also be bad if something is happening during the day that has nothing to do with the story I'm illustrating, and the story is supposed to be cheerful, and I'm feeling sort of crummy. The characters that day are going to look sort of unhappy, and so we'll have to just put those in the wastebasket.
That actually brings us to another question that we have. Rebecca would like to know, so obviously you're a career illustrator. You illustrated your first book, I think, in 81. Is that correct? 1980?
I think that's true. It's working out so far.
It's so far.
Yeah, so far.
Why stop now? So she understands that you are a career illustrator, but she'd like to know, because when push comes to shove, it is a job. She wants to know what happens when you get frustrated with your job. When you get those feelings, do you take a break from the illustrating? Do you walk away? She'd like to know, what is it that you do, sort of just to clear your mind and get right on back to it?
Yeah. It depends on the cause of the frustration. Sometimes I find that if first of all, I have to figure out why I'm annoyed. I mean, I know that I can tell when something isn't going right. And I have learned over the years that if you wind up erasing and drawing the same thing 4 times in a row, probably there's something fundamentally wrong with what you're trying to draw. It just isn't sitting right with you. So the first thing is to identify what the problem is. And sometimes that can be often it's a lack of understanding the character or the situation. So in that case, I do try to step back, and I try to either, if it's a full story I'm working on, I'll try to move to another section of the story. If it's a large piece that there's no possibility of moving to another section, then maybe I'll try to make myself draw a completely different composition. Do something that you don't think is right, and I don't really have any hope for the thing working out. But sometimes just changing the venue of the structure of the drawing is a good idea. I usually try to work my way through something if it's a difficulty. I don't like to get up and abandon it, because
interesting.
It's not that it's too easy, but what happens then is that I find that I would then get into the habit of giving up on something. And I'd rather stop something in the middle of what I'm working on when I'm feeling confident or comfortable with it, or know where I'm going to go with the character. And if I'm really stuck, I'll get to a point, and then I will put it aside for the evening, but I'll be thinking about it all the time while I'm working on my sketchbook, or but also in the back of my mind, and this is something that Michael Bond told me once with the Paddington stories, the way he structured them was that he would get Paddington into a situation without knowing how Paddington was going to get out of the situation, but knowing that over the period of a few days, he had confidence in himself and Paddington that he would figure it out. And there's a part of having when you're making pictures, when you're making art, whether it's music or words or any form of artwork, one of the major things is to have confidence in your own ability to figure out the answer to the questions that you're posing for yourself. So nothing is ever hopeless. Sometimes, and it's okay, sometimes some things are just not going to work out. But in the end, that's actually working out because
it's part of the process.
You've learned something that,
yeah,
about yourself that well, you do learn something by failure, but it's annoying. And I have to admit, early on, one of the ways I dealt with frustration was to throw things. And so that's something I outgrew after, after a few disastrous books flying across the room.
It's so important to learn. And I do think it's very interesting to talk about really just the journey that you go on in terms of the process and while you are creating some of these stories.
You really do have to, you don't have to like the process, but you have to embrace it. Sometimes the process is, it goes quickly and sometimes it goes slowly, but allowing yourself to go through a process is important because, everybody has ideas. Everybody can come up with an idea, and your work, it just sort of suddenly springs to you, and there it is. But getting the idea to the point of being in a context and a form that you can share your idea with someone else, that takes a lot of work.
Yeah. To share your idea, and yours are just so beautifully recognized. Oh, Bob, only because I know we only have you till 3:00. What I'd love to do is get to some of these live questions that we are being asked. We were just asked by Joanne, do you have a favorite reference book to help you re-see a figure when you have trouble with a specific challenge?
I do not have a favorite book, but I will tell you that the best books that I have found are the how-to cartoon books.
How-to cartoon.
Yes, any book on simple cartooning or animation, especially, is invaluable for synthesizing how characters move.
Wonderful. And Joanne, I certainly hope that answers the question for you. And next we have one from Deb. Hi, Bob. I have a question for you. I'd like to know what Paddington Bear might tell the children to help with their fears regarding this virus or of wearing the face masks. Thank you, Deb, for that question.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. On my Instagram page, I did a little story of visual thoughts about what would be going on at the Browns' house with Paddington being quarantined in London. I think that Paddington would. It's hard to speak for Paddington because I feel that Michael Bond really is the only person who does put a voice to Paddington. But if I were to imagine the advice that Paddington would give from my friendship with Mr. Bond, it would be that you need to keep yourself safe, and you need to pay attention to what experts and scientists and doctors are saying, and you need to need to remember that this is not going to go on forever, and that just like many crises in human history, we've been able to figure out ways around them, and ways to deal with them, and ways that are not based on wishful thinking, but ways that are based on fact. And one of the best methods of arriving at a factual understanding of what's going on is being generous with each other and understanding that everybody is frustrated and that everybody is scared, and that some people's frustration and fear come out in unpleasant ways, and some people are able to deal with that fear and frustration in more productive ways. But everybody pretty much is feeling the same way. And if we can give each other space and listen to what each other's saying and know that everybody's on the same page, I think we'd be all better off. And I think that that's the type of thing that a bear like Paddington can, the advice that he can give us, because he always, in all the Paddington stories, the main theme is Paddington believes in people's good nature. He believes that people are essentially kind and that they want to do well by each other, and that they're rooting for each other. And that's how Paddington goes through all the stories. And I think that would be a good example for what we can, how we're navigating whatever this is now.
Whatever this is, and also remembering these connections that we have, and I'm going to just keep on connecting people to you at this moment. Stephen would like to know, what were your professional relationships with other illustrators of Paddington over the years? Do you feel a responsibility to such an iconic character to not deviate too far from what's recognizable? But at the same time, I know you really have put your own stamp on this beloved character. So if you could talk a little bit about that, and to Stephen's question.
Well, I haven't met any of the other illustrators. I haven't talked to them. I have worked with editors who have worked with them. But I think that the thing about a character like Paddington, and I hate to call him a character, he's really simply a bear, is that there's such an iconic thing about his dress and the things that he carries through the world that made him not so much easy to illustrate, but made it clear when if I draw a bear with a hat and a duffel coat carrying a suitcase and sometimes wearing Wellington boots, it's going to be perceived as Paddington no matter what. So that made it very easy. The tricky part was trying to find a way to put expression on Paddington's face and an expression to his movement that was different from some of the other illustrators, but was actually more in line with some of the original pen and ink drawings that Peggy Fortnum did in the novels. Those were really more my guide than some of the other picture book illustrators, because Paddington's been illustrated in all sorts of various forms. I know when I first started out, it was working with Michael, we did have a very long conversation about what color hat and coat and boots should be, because he was tired of their changing color from book to book. So he wanted to pin that down. And in the original novel, Paddington's hat is actually black, but we both decided that was not going to fly for picture book world. Red is a much more fun color.
Much more fun. So inviting. Such an inviting color.
Very nice.
And I just want to say very quickly, I do notice that wonderful little stuffed Paddington above you.
This is from a Yacht Toy, Paddington. They make
And
the
a fun
bears.
shout out to Yacht Toy.
Yep, they make the bears in this country, and they're very cute. They make them in very different different formats. This is a squishable baby bear.
A
But
squishable
yes,
baby bear.
I have them all around the studio, and I have other bears from other manufacturers and other iterations. But yes, Paddington is it's nice to it's nice to have a bear to talk to because yeah,
It's good. I say it every day. If you don't have a bear, what are you doing?
Well,
What are you doing?
Absolutely.
So I have another question from Leslie. She is wondering, as an elementary school teacher, what would you tell aspiring authors and illustrators? Do you have a particular piece of advice?
Yes, I would say that the most important thing to do is to follow through on any ideas that you have. This sort of dovetails with what we were talking about earlier, but I think the thing that surprises kids the most when they come to telling their own stories is the power that the story achieves when it's finished. You know, you have an idea, and if you can bring this, it doesn't have to, and it's not a matter of length. It's not a matter of format. It's a matter of having a beginning, a middle, and end, and something that happens to a character or a set of characters that changes them from what they were at the beginning of the story to what they are at the end of the story. And the change can be subtle, it can be small, it can be just understanding something about the world that you didn't understand before, or it can be mind-bogglingly huge, but the completion of the idea, I think, is the most important thing. It's sometimes every storyteller has a difficult part of a story to tell. Some people have trouble beginning a story. You have an idea. How do you begin it? How much stuff do you reveal to the audience to start with? Do you reveal it all at once? Do you slide into it bit by bit? All that stuff. And some people, the middle part of the story might be difficult. I mean, what's going on? You have the characters moving. What are they doing? What's and then the question becomes, well, how can you make this middle part, this action part, different from maybe other stories that you've read? What's the wildest thing or the most interesting thing that can happen? But the biggest problem, and I think we all know this from every television show, every movie, every novel we've ever read, how you like the characters at the beginning, you like the action that they're going to, and then the thing ends, and how many times have we said, well, that was an awful ending. How did that happen? The ending of the story, I think, is the hardest part of telling a tale, because you want it to end at a point where the reader, the audience, is satisfied that they've understood the journey the characters have taken. And if they don't feel that satisfaction, it's like everything that came before was a setup for disappointment. So, it's hard. That I really think is the hardest part of storytelling. And now that we've all become consumers of a lot of media, not by choice, but by needing something to do. I think people probably are beginning to, that I would imagine that would be a criticism that people have, and it's tricky. You have to really know your characters well to know when their story is done and you can put them aside. But that's why a character like Paddington and other ongoing characters are so important, because their stories, their individual chapters in their lives and their stories end, but then there's always another story, you know.
Right.
I mean, like Harry Potter. I mean, it just
Mm.
that. But then, if you think about it, from what we all know about how that 7-book arc happened, and same with Star Wars. Those creators knew the ending. They knew the beginning. They
Right.
knew the ending. What they didn't know was the middle,
Middle, the journey part.
the journey part.
The journey part. I also did want to ask you, I find that so many of your books hold this extraordinary sense of wonder and of discovery. I would refer very quickly to your books with some of my favorite characters, Annabelle and Gretchen and Mitchell. You'll see several of those books behind me at the moment. And I do want to also mention very quickly to anybody who would like to actually look at these original illustrations. Many of them are available on the website, rmichelson.com, rmichelson.com. So please feel free to head over there if you really want to see these illustrations and what we're talking about. So Mitchell and Annabelle, so many of their journeys, it is discovery, it is excitement, there's a whimsy to all of them. I'd like to know, how do you maintain and how do you hold on to that excitement and that discovery about the world, especially in times like this when it feels like things around us are making less and less sense? How do you hold on to that wonder?
Well, that's a tough one. I'm an only child, so I had to fabricate a lot of my fantasy life on my own, with the help of Saturday morning television. Captain Kangaroo was a favorite. Um, I think that one way to hold on to the sense of wonder and discovery, and it, that I think is important to navigate the world with, is to realize that, well, to not be angry. I think that's an important thing. One can be disappointed, frustrated. Those are all useful emotions. Anger is also useful emotion at particular points, but a constant sense of anger is not going to be very helpful. There comes a time when, if you can accept some of the stuff that you just can't change, that's happening to you in the world and that's happening to your world, and then, okay, so this thing I can't change, but there's something maybe I can change, or there's some little bit of the world that still gives me some pleasure or joy, and you dive into that, you know. You try to discover the things in your world that give you pleasure, and you don't make any judgment about that. You just try to be kind to yourself by allowing yourself to find the things that make you happy, and then try to build on that as best you can. That and really that's how a lot of my books get created. It's the idea of, okay, these characters are having this situation come to them, and they want to try to change the situation to make themselves happier. And sometimes that's by interacting with other characters, and sometimes that's by something that's completely internal, like on the characters you were talking about. They all have these internal imaginative journeys that help them figure out what's going on that in their daily lives. And that I think is extremely important. If you think about your experience on, as a human being, as a journey from being born to whatever, then then you realize that everything is changing all the time. Nothing is ever static. I remember that was brought home to us, to Zoe and me, when we first had children, because we, before the kids were born, we were under the impression that you could actually plan for anything.
You learn very quickly you can't.
You cannot. And that actually, instead of being scary, turns out to be good, because you're constantly having to reinvent yourself, to react to another human being, you don't get stuck. You can't get stuck. And that I think is the worst thing, to feel like you're stuck where you are in the world. So it's nice that we have a chance, as the sun goes down, we have a chance to go to sleep and get up in the morning and start all over again.
Start a new journey every single day. Well, Bob, I'm going to bring it to our very last question, which was from Sharon. She's wondering, how do you feel about marmalade sandwiches? You like them?
I like marmalade.
Eat them?
No, I like, I have to say, I did not have a full understanding of marmalade before I met Paddington. And now that I have been doing this for over 20 years, I have come to an understanding of marmalade, which a level of understanding that I never thought I would get to. The smooth marmalade, the stuff with the bits of orange in it, the bitter, the sweet marmalade. It's all good. It's all very sticky. It's
quite sticky.
Very sticky.
Oh gosh, quite sticky.
It is, but you cooking with it, marmalade and chicken. How can that be bad?
You get a little bit of that sweet, a little bit of the sticky, and
you do.
Isn't that what life in the journey is about anyway?
Absolutely.
Well, I want to take an opportunity to thank everyone who has tuned in to watch this segment. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, if you'd like to see any of the art, please head over to rmichelson.com, RMICHELSON.com. And I want to invite you to join us next week when we will be live one-on-one at 2 with Jarrett Krasaska. And let me tell you, we are going to have a very, very special unveiling of a limited edition print that Jarrett is doing. And all of those proceeds are going to benefit the Bookseller Industry Charitable Foundation. So
that's a wonderful thing.
Bob, we'll hope that you join us also. But
oh, absolutely. Jarrett's wonderful.
Jarrett's fantastic. Bob, thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time to answer all of our questions and just to be with us in general. I personally always look forward to any conversation I get to have with you anytime.
Well, thank you very much, Alana. It was very, very nice of you to host this from the comfort of your studio.
The comfort of our homes. And thank you for inviting us into your studio, Bob. And I certainly hope that you and Zoe and the kids, everyone is staying well and safe.
Yeah. Yes, we are, and we hope you and everyone is safe in your world also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you again, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Bob.